Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Daylite and Decagon. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing all right. You know what? I have some surprise follow-up for you.
Surprise follow-up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to talk about the Codex app again because since we released the last episode of App Stories and talked about sort of the UI UX disaster that was the new ChatGPT app, OpenAI has changed it, and they've made it modal so that you're either in Codex mode or you're in ChatGPT mode, and then within ChatGPT mode, you have either regular ChatGPT or work ChatGPT modes. And I gotta say, I don't like it. I kind of liked I liked ChatGPT in the corner when I was using Codex because it was like I'd be working away on something and I had a question that was either tangential or unrelated, and I could just go into that little corner chat thing, get a quick answer, and then make it go away again. And I don't know. I think I'm really in the minority here, but I kind of liked having that available to me in Codex.
Yeah, so I updated it today, and I still don't kind of get it. So,
It's simple, a lot simpler now.
well, okay,
Don't
sure.
you think?
You say, no, because it's when I open the sidebar. So at the top of the sidebar, you can toggle between ChatGPT and Codex.
Right.
When I toggle Codex, it's the Codex that I know and love, and I
Right.
get it. When I toggle ChatGPT, the thing that gets me is that I still see my local Codex projects, and I see some of my chats from ChatGPT on the web, but I don't see my projects from ChatGPT on the web.
Yeah, they said
Oh,
that
I guess they're at the bottom.
Yeah,
So
I
this
think
is
they
the
are.
this is the thing that gets me.
The problem is
the-
none of this stuff is labeled very well.
It's not labeled very well, and I get confused in the UI, in the sidebar, by what is a project local and what is
Yes.
a project that is exclusive to ChatGPT, .com, whatever you want to call
Right,
it.
cloud, web, or
Cloud web. There are three
remote.
different types of projects, exactly, because you can have local,
Yes.
which I have on my MacBook Pro.
Sure.
I have remote, which are local, but on the Mac Studio.
Yes.
And then I got my ChatGPT cloud projects.
Right.
And I mean, I get why, because they're doing ChatGPT and ChatGPT work, and work can also work with your
Yeah.
local folders. So I get the need to call them the same thing, to have them available in the same space. I think the problem from my perspective is a terminology one.
Yeah.
Just call them projects in chatgpt.com and
Yeah.
call them folders in ChatGPT work. Like, don't call them the same thing.
Yeah, I
Call
think
him-
that's a good idea. I think, look, I think the sidebar is a disaster right now. There's too much, and there are too many different kinds of things in there. It gets very confusing to me. I think if there's anything that bothers me more than, that's the thing that bothers me even more than the way ChatGPT was handled before. But I'm also looking at it now and realizing that I did go into ChatGPT and ask a couple of questions, and now I have the responses to those questions, and now I don't know how to get into work because the title of my questions is at the top now. Do you follow me? I don't have the little pill that lets me switch between work and regular ChatGPT anymore.
Because once you I think the issue is that once you begin a chat,
yeah.
it cannot become a work thing.
Right, but then how do I switch to work if I want to do a separate chat that's a work chat?
You create a new one, and there should be the toggle at the top.
Oh, I see at the top. I see.
So they
Right,
basically
I got
copied
it.
Claude now, where
Yeah, okay.
you create a chat, and then it can be chat or co-work.
Right.
And it's the same thing here. It's chat
Right.
or work.
Their little
My-
pill that just isn't underneath the box. It's at
Exactly.
the top of the page.
I think that my main problem at this point is that they're calling everything a project. They should be calling them projects if you are a ChatGPT cloud user, and they should just be called folders when it comes to local work stuff. That's essentially what Anthropic has done. Projects are Claude chatbot only. Everything else is called a folder. When you begin working in co-work, it just says pick a folder. Like calling everything a project is my issue at this point.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
everything else I cannot follow. Everything else I cannot follow. A
Yeah, because
chat
if you're
can
in
be-
Claude, a project, well, yes, it has to have a folder if it's going to be like some kind of code thing or a co-work thing.
like they have this insane UI right now where if you take a look at the sidebar, everything has the same icon. It's impossible to tell whether it's a project is a folder on your local computer or on your local machine or a project sandboxed in the cloud.
It's
Like,
very hard to tell
what is this?
And because there's so many of these little show more things, it's also very hard to see where the projects end and the just threaded chats begin.
Exactly. So I am just happy sticking with the codecs toggle at the top of the sidebar. And when I want to use ChatGPT regular, I'm just gonna go to the website in my desktop browser because I don't need ChatGPT work. I can just stay in codecs and do assistant stuff that is not about programming in codecs, and it's fine.
I know. Yeah,
It's so confusing.
It's so confusing. And really, if you're okay with dealing with the somewhat developery nomenclature when you're using codecs, you're probably better off there anyway because you can do more in codecs than you can do in work. So yeah, all my work is in codecs actually, and I'm not sure if I will ever use Claude Work for anything.
Same.
I don't think it has any advantages, just limitations as far as I can tell.
I use codecs for programming stuff, and I use codecs for regular research, and I use codecs for regular assistant stuff like managing my emails and tasks.
Right.
And it just makes more sense to me. And when I want to use a chatbot, I either use ChatGPT on my phone or on the web, or, and this is going to be the topic of today's episode actually, Siri AI. So the very clear split on my end when it comes to what is an agent and what is a chatbot.
Yes. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Daylite. If you run a business on a Mac, you know the challenge. Client emails are in one place, notes are somewhere else, and projects live in another app. And when something falls through the cracks, it's usually because it was in your head or scattered across Post-it notes instead of in your system. That's exactly what Daylite was built to solve. For over 20 years, Daylite has helped service-based businesses keep their clients' projects, tasks, calendars, and communications connected in one place. Every email, meeting, note, file, and follow-up becomes part of a complete and ever-growing client history, giving you the context you need to know what happened, what's next, and who needs your attention instantly. And with Mail and Daylite, your email lives inside Daylite along with the rest of your work, so conversations naturally stay connected to the people, deals, and projects that matter to you. Built exclusively for the Mac, iPhone, and iPad, Daylite feels right at home in the Apple ecosystem. If you're ready to spend less time searching for information and more time moving your business forward, visit daylite.app to start your free trial and use the code AppStories50, that's AppStories and the number 50, to get 50% off your first year of Daylite on an annual plan. That's daylite.app and the code AppStories50 for 50% off your first year of Daylite. Our thanks to Daylite for their support of the show. Well, let's dig in then. Let's dig in with Siri AI because we just did our previews of the OSs that are coming in the fall because Apple released its public betas, and we have previews of macOS, watchOS, visionOS, which is actually not a public beta. It's a developer beta, but there's some very interesting stuff in it that Devin wrote about. And then you wrote about Siri AI, which is very much the highlight feature of not only iOS and iPadOS, which you'll be writing about in the fall, but also all the other OSs for that matter. So I thought today that we would talk a little bit about Siri AI and kind of what it can do, what it's good at, what it's not good at, and then kind of how we're dealing with it and how it fits into our lives, I think. I think we can end with that. But
Yeah.
what do you I guess I would start off by describing Siri AI as good at world knowledge and good at finding information in system apps that are already set up as schemas. So things like finding emails, finding notes, finding reminders to a degree. I've used it mainly for things like notes and iMessage so far. What has your experience been like in terms of what it's good at?
Yeah, I think it's good enough at word knowledge. So just the thing that it used to be that you would ask Siri a question and it would say, "Here's what I found on the web," and just a bunch of links. And
Yeah.
now most of your questions Siri can probably answer just fine. You're watching a movie and you be like, "Hey, where was this actor?" And that's in this movie, and it's gonna answer that. It's
Right.
gonna be nice looking. Maybe you have a photo in the response, and you can expand it from the dynamic island, and then you can go into the app and continue chatting there. You can ask about places. You can ask about history, about music, and it does a pretty good job. I say. I
Yeah,
think
local
you.
restaurants, things going
Yeah.
around in your community, that kind of thing. It reminds me a little bit of what Spotlight has been expanded to do over the years. Spotlight had a lot of stuff baked into it, things like sports,
Mhm.
entertainment, landmarks, travel, that kind of thing. A lot of it was pulling from places like Wikipedia and other common sources. And it has a vibe like that. And to me, I compared it to Google's AI overviews because I think one of the things that I've had this reaction to a lot of what I'm seeing written about Mac OS in particular online is that people are giving Apple a very hard time about tiny details of the design, things like Squircle jail in the icons and that sort of thing, and letting Apple off the hook on AI. And I think while
That is a
you
very good point.
you know what I mean, and I think
Yeah.
that you and
I
I
think most people in our industry are getting upset about the wrong things.
That's what I'm saying. And I think you and I have to be careful since you and we're kind of at the bleeding edge of
Yeah.
agentic stuff that we don't set our expectations wrong for what Siri AI is supposed to be. On the other hand, I do think that it is fair game for criticism of where it falls short. And one place I do think it falls a little short is that the world knowledge is very generic when like I said, plan me a weekend trip to Chicago, a place that I know very well since I lived there for a couple of decades. And it hit the highlights, but it's also the kind of thing you would find on like Travel Advisor. It's like
It's
if
pretty
you
basic.
very basic. And I did type it in. I typed the exact same thing into Google,
Hmm.
and the AI overview was almost word for. I mean, it was almost identical. The
Hmm.
same landmarks, the same restaurants, that
Hmm.
kind of thing.
You think they're using the same search index?
I haven't done extensive testing yet, but boy, based on things like this Chicago search, it was so close, Federico. Now, you can drill down and you can say, look, I get it.
Hmm.
Chicago style pizza is a thing.
Hmm.
Give me the hidden gems. Give me the restaurants that the locals go to. And
Yeah.
it does a better job. It'll look at more the sources instead of being something like TripAdvisor will
Hmm.
be like a local Chicago website that, back in the day was like a local
Yeah.
newspaper type thing. And you'll get a little bit more. So you can kind of drill in, or you could say, give me just the best hidden gems of this particular neighborhood once you have a sense of, the overview of Chicago. So
Hmm.
it's not that it's not possible. I just think that, for instance, there's an awful lot of information on my devices, having lived years and years and years in Chicago, that you would think that maybe if it was really pulling personal context from all those things, it would have a better sense for what I would be interested in going to Chicago as opposed to your average tourist. And so that's kind of like my first criticism of where the world knowledge is. It's fine. I was able to find like what are the hours for this restaurant in my town and
Yeah.
when is it open, and it does a very nice job giving you things like maps. Like I wanted to find a place in Charlotte, gave me a great map. I can tap on it. I can get driving, give me driving directions. It'll give me an option of call them if I wanted to, which seems very old fashioned, but hey. And some nice pictures, and a link to the website, I think. So it does a good job of that kind of basic stuff, but I feel like it's not pulling enough of what I might want, something that's more personal to me.
Yeah, I feel like I think it does a good job at that sort of thing. I also find it to be very good with maps and directions. One of my favorite aspects so far, I think, is the on-screen awareness. So, for
Yes.
example, this works out really well when you don't want to talk to Siri, but you can just swipe down from the dynamic island. So, for example, yesterday I got an email about an appointment to get my tires changed for my car, and it was an email in Italian, and I wanted to add it to our shared family calendar so that
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia could also see it. And I just swiped down. And now, obviously, Siri AI is English only, but
Right.
that's just a limitation. The large language model underneath can totally speak multiple languages just fine. And it can also understand multiple languages because that's what LLMs do. And
Yep.
so I just swiped down, and with the email message open in Spark, so not even Apple Mail, but in Spark, I just said, can you save this in my family calendar? And it just knew what I meant. It sort of scanned the contents of the message on screen. That's part of the new on-screen awareness that Siri has, that is also exposing shortcuts much better than it used to be. And it understood that it was an appointment, that it was in Italian, and it created a matching event in Italian in our family calendar. And
Right.
that was perfect. And it pulled like the details, the times, added some notes in the notes field of the event, and that I found to be working really well for all kinds of applications. Like whenever you're looking at something, you can just swipe down and say, "Hey, what is this?" or "Get me directions to this place," or "Find this song." Well, no, the music stuff isn't working
No, well, and I don't
really
think
well.
it will either.
And it sounds like it won't for now, which is silly.
Yeah.
But like I think it's good enough for what the vast majority of people who were complaining that Siri was not intelligent. I think it's gonna be good enough for that. I just don't think you should expect a deep research quality level from any kind of like more detailed question. Like you ask
Yeah.
for a trip to Chicago, you're gonna get the basic stuff. And even if you say no, think harder. Get me, because I've also done this. Like get me less generic recommendations. It just won't do it.
Yeah.
Like I asked for some recommendations for apps that were using app intent, for example. And it just gave me like obvious stuff from the App Store. Like it said
Yeah.
working copy because Mac Stories wrote about it 2 years ago, and Uber because it was a partner of Apple. Like that's really old knowledge. I mean, it's technically correct,
Yeah.
but it's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're asking about, hey, what's the movie length of The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan, you're going to get that just fine. Just maybe
Mm-hmm.
don't ask, hey, can you get me the exact, can you explain to me, like, can you give me the names of the entire crew that work? Like, drill down into the specifics and you can see the little cracks in the system.
Yeah, you can. And I think like here's another example that I thought was kind of interesting to me because I think one of the things we're getting at is that relative to old Siri, the new Siri is much better. Relative to some agentic tooling that you and I use, it's not so great. And one thing that I tried was I made an airline reservation and I had the website open with all the details, like my confirmation code, the dates, all that stuff. And I asked Siri AI to use the on-screen awareness to put it in my calendar. And it did. It found, but the web page didn't have all the details. It just had most of the details. And so it could only do what was on the screen. Whereas I then asked Codex to do it, and it said, sure, I see that there's a button on the page that lets you download the ICS file. So it went into computer use. It clicked on the button, downloaded the ICS file, then went to the downloads folder, double clicked it, and installed it in my calendar. And that had like a lot more information, like, how much I had paid and the confirmation code, a lot of the details that weren't on the web page. And that's kind of, in a lot of ways to me, a good example of the difference between what something like Siri AI can do and what an agentic harness can do. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Decagon. If your team is dealing with more support tickets, more channels, and higher expectations from customers, you've probably thought about using AI for customer support, and you've probably seen how limited or time-consuming most options are. That's where Decagon comes in. Decagon helps companies create personalized concierge-style customer experiences with AI agents across chat, email, voice, and SMS. They're available 24/7, feel natural to talk to, and can resolve customer requests on their own, so businesses can keep up with requests without losing their personal touch. Decagon plugs directly into your existing systems, so agents can get live quickly, and because workflows can be updated using natural language, teams can make changes themselves without long engineering cycles. That means less time spent managing workflows, more time focused on customers, and ROI in weeks. Once live, agents can pull up-to-date information, take action on requests, and understand the context behind any conversation. Plus, Decagon gives your team visibility into why agents make decisions and what's happening across every conversation, so it's easier to spot trends and improve the experience over time. Decagon helps power millions of conversations every day for brands you know and love, including Avis, Affirm, Fanatics, and Aura. Ready to transform your customer support? Go to decagon.ai/appstories to get a personalized demo and see what Decagon can do for your team. Check Decagon out at decagon.ai/appstories. That's decagon.ai/appstories. Our thanks to Decagon for their support of the show.
We should also talk about actually working with apps.
Yeah, we should.
In my experience, I've had I think Siri AI has done a pretty good job dealing with notes and reminders.
And calendar is pretty good at too.
Calendar is pretty good. For example, you can now ask stuff like, "Hey, what tasks do I have in this particular section of this particular list in reminders?" And that's all thanks to the better schemas and app intents that they have done.
Yep.
For reminders. I saw somebody mention that because I wrote about some of the issues that I've had with Apple Mail and the search index of Apple Mail, and I was asking can you tell me when? Can you find out when we took a break with Mac Stories Weekly last year? Because I know that it's in my email. You just gotta find the messages from last summer, and it just found one semi-related message from you. And when I pushed back and I said, "No, you gotta give me the exact dates,"
Right.
it kept saying, "No, I cannot find any other messages that mention the exact dates." But I did have those messages, so I opened ChatGPT and I asked Codex. And a minute later, it said, "Yes, these are the messages in your Gmail, and this is when you went on holiday last summer." And I saw somebody mention on Mastodon, I think, that currently there are some issues with messages that are more than 6 months old in developer beta 3. So at the very least, Apple is aware of this.
Yeah.
I remain personally a little skeptical as to how this thing is going to perform for people like us with tons of apps installed, especially when you start asking for content that is multiple years old and maybe scattered across a bunch of apps. I have not seen Siri AI being able to carry out multiple and different requests at the same time. I can ask Siri AI to set multiple timers at the same time,
Yeah.
but that is the same app. It's dealing with the clock app. And the moment I started asking, "Hey, can you triangulate these reminders and these emails and these notes in the same question?" That's when it's it couldn't do it.
I've been able to get it to use multiple apps, not in a coordinated way, but in a one after the other way. Like
one after the other. I think it works.
Yeah,
but like
you're describing something a little different.
Unfortunately, I'm describing something a little more agentic, where like you give it
tool
one
calling.
request, tool calling, and it breaks down the request into multiple tool call sessions, and it executes all of those maybe in parallel, maybe sequentially.
Right.
And that's our main problem this year for us and for the macStories audience and the AppStories audience. I think many of our listeners and many of our readers are power users. They are used to these features in Claude or Codex, and you gotta reset your expectations a little bit here. I think from what I've seen, Siri AI can be a pretty good, very good even, like general purpose assistant on the iPhone. Do not go in and start formulating your questions like you would to Claude or to Codex, because it's not going to work.
Yeah, and to me it's even more frustrating on the Mac in a way, because the Mac exposes so much of this metadata, and so much of it has not been incorporated into Siri AI yet. So for instance, I would say, look at my downloads folder and create a folder and put all the PNGs in the folder. It can't do that. It can't, at least it told me it couldn't make files and folders. Maybe that'll change, but at least when I last tested it, that didn't work at all. And that's true for a lot of things like music too, because if the music app has an enormous amount of metadata in it that is accessible by things like AppleScript, but it's not accessible. It's still, it's even Shortcuts doesn't have as extensive an access as AppleScript does. And Siri AI has really even less. It can play a song. You can find and play a song, and that's about where it ends right now.
Yeah. Cannot like manage your playlists or manage your queue, do those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen any particular examples of personal context in action?
Well, not beyond the idea that personal context is finding something. I can, you know what I mean? I can have it find messages, like find the message where Federico told me X or Y. That works, but that's not context, really.
Well, I think I think Apple thinks of that as personal context. I think our problem is that
search.
Apple... I've actually been thinking about this. I think the problem is that Apple and us, we have different interpretations of the word context.
Yeah.
Because if you say to me, Siri now has personal context, right?
Yeah.
And I ask Siri, what's a good pizza in Rome, right? And if you tell me that Siri has personal context, Siri with context in the sense of... I just activated Siri, by the way. Of course, this problem is not going to go away. But context in the context as an idea of, it knows me, it has context about me, and is going to answer based on pre-existing knowledge that is contextual to me. And if I ask what's a good pizza in Rome, I would expect Siri to say, well, these are 3 good pizzerias. You recently were in Gaeta, in south of Rome, on vacation. If you want more of that style of pizza, here's the other place too.
Right. Or maybe it would say, here are ones that are close to where you live, or here's one that's similar to a place that you mentioned in a text message to Sylvia that you liked, that kind of thing.
I think of that as context.
Yeah.
I think our definition of personal context is, again, setting the expectations too high for what Apple is actually shipping. And this will actually be, I think, this will be in our reviews. I think personal context is basically search. I don't think it's proactive context.
It's personal data.
It's personal data. but it's not proactive data. Like it's not proactively injecting that context into the responses that you're getting from Siri.
It's not inferring responses from the past. It's not doing that at all. That is very true.
That was like a thing that I kept like getting stuck on. Like I was like, why is it not working? And then I realized, I think Apple is thinking of this differently than I am.
Which I think is a problem because they have fixed search in a lot of ways. Like searching in messages got a lot better last year. Search in mail and in Spotlight got a lot better this year. Search is search. You can just use search. You don't need AI to do search. If you've got a good index, you just find things.
Because see but the thing, there's so much potential about a personal context done right.
Yeah.
Again, imagine another example. If Siri AI, it's not if, it has access to my photos, my location, and my text messages, right? Let's say that I'm in Florence, which I was a couple of days ago, to see My Chemical Romance, and I ask, hey, what's a good place to get a pizza?
Yeah.
A Siri AI with personal context that makes a reasonable prediction about my question would say, hey, since you are with Sylvia's sister, and I know from your personal messages that she's lactose intolerant, and you're going for lunch because it's 1 p.m., you probably want to check out these places that offer lactose intolerant options. That's the kind of personal context that I would be amazed by.
Yeah,
right?
It's details dug out of things that it can put together with other information.
It's like you are predicting, again, and that is the problem with setting our expectations, because that's exactly the sort of thing that a giant model like Fable would do.
Right.
Make a discernment about the unsaid of my request.
It's
based
also,
on context.
It's also problematic given Apple's privacy standpoint, because if that was being inferred because Sylvia's sister's phone was near your phone, as opposed to looking in your...
No, you could just look at my photos, infer that...
Right.
I
photos or email or text messages, whatever it is. But
right? But that's not a reality. That's obviously, I think, the path forward for Apple to say, we are processing these things locally, and when you ask a question, we can make a reasonable assumption that you are maybe you are with somebody else, maybe you are in a different location, maybe, some details about your current circumstances have changed, and we're maybe going to offer an option in the response that says, but if you're looking for lactose intolerant options because you are with Alessandra, maybe you also want to consider this place.
Right.
That's not what happens today in Siri AI.
No. I will give you two examples that I just thought of as we were talking. One, it knows who my wife is when I say text my wife. So, right?
Yes.
So it knows
and that's probably because you have the nickname in
No,
your contacts?
I looked. I just looked now.
Okay.
I don't have Jennifer in there. It doesn't say wife anywhere in the contact card.
Okay.
It also tried to infer your age when I asked it how old you are, because I asked it when I was doing my testing, how old is Federico Fetici? Because I knew your birthday was in your contact card. And it said you're 116 years old.
Yeah, I look great for 116.
You do look great for 116. And I said, he doesn't look that old. And Siri responded, you're right, he doesn't. I actually don't have the year of his birth in the contact card, which, I mean, look, AIs hallucinate.
Why 116 though?
116.
That I don't know. Born in 1910?
Yes.
Why?
1910. Well, that is a very odd answer. It obviously didn't look at the picture to see that there's no possible way that you would be 116. It had structured data and ignored the fact that the year wasn't in the card. And then I said, well, it may just be that he takes good care of himself. And Siri agreed that, maybe he has a good skincare regimen.
I have seen that. Wow, that's one skincare regimen to get to 116 like this. I have seen some signs of the model being a little sycophantic sometimes. like just agreeing with you.
Yes, that was definitely what was going on there.
Which is, again, something that the other AI companies have worked pretty hard over the past year to tune more.
Yeah, because it
especially
wasn't.
after the whole GPT 4.0
It was
thing.
it was very much the typical sycophantic situation because I wasn't really answering. I wasn't asking a question. I was just commenting on
you were
the
just
response.
saying things, and he was like, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. But yeah, so the thing about personal context, it's not really automatic context. It's more like it's search. Like they should have just called it personal search, like in the sense that, yes, you're looking into my photos, you're looking into my messages. That is one of the things that I really hope Apple can nail in the next couple of years, because that would be incredible. That would be like a Siri AI that anticipates the unsaid parts of a question, so that I don't have to tell the model, hey, I'm with a person right now who is lactose intolerant, and we are in Florence, and we're looking to go to lunch. Like all these things right now, I have to tell manually to Siri.
Right. You have to
the
tell
dream
where
is for
you are and who you're with. And
the dream is for Siri to just figure it out.
right. Have you been able to pass data from one app to another? Like,
Nope.
I haven't either. Where it's like,
No.
take the contents of this note and put it in a text message to
No.
John. It won't do that.
No, one time I said, hey, can you run my Apple Frames shortcut and
Pull a photo out of Photos.
and use a photo from Photos with it? And he said, I can run a shortcut, but I cannot pass input. And I was like, okay.
Oh, I haven't been able to get it to run a shortcut on the Mac at all.
And then it said, oh, but I can run this other shortcut, and I can copy the result to the clipboard. And I said, yeah, do it. And then he thought about it, and a few seconds later, it's like, I apologize, I cannot actually copy anything to your clipboard.
Not surprising. A couple of things about the app, and I'm going to speak specifically to the Mac because I haven't tested as much on other devices. But, we've been talking about how it has pretty good world knowledge, but I do get a lot of, something went wrong, I can't do that type responses. And I will do that.
A lot of them.
That does that.
A lot of them.
Yeah, I would say currently, and look, we're still in a beta, and it's going to release as a beta in the fall. But I would say I was getting that like 20% of the time, maybe. I mean, it's common. It's common. And so there's that. And then also I gave it a bunch of URLs and I said, make a markdown link list of this. And it made the markdown link list, but the links weren't clickable. Like I couldn't open the web pages, and I couldn't copy it either. The share sheet wouldn't let me copy it. And there is an actual copy button that's hidden behind a 3-dot menu for some reason. And that copy button currently doesn't work. So it's still pretty rough in a lot of places.
Do you like the grid layout of the app?
No, I just switched it to list almost immediately.
Me too. Is there anything particular that the Siri app on the Mac can do that it cannot do on iOS?
No, I think it's kind of the opposite.
Same?
It's pretty much the same, and actually I've found the iOS version to be a little more reliable. And I can't tell. I'm testing on 2 different Macs right now. One's an M1 Max Mac Studio, and the other is an M4 Max MacBook Pro. And I can't tell whether some of the issues are hardware related or not. I think they're not. I think it's just the software. I think it's just you get different results depending on the time of the day and whether it's busy on the servers or whatever. For a while, it seemed like in the early testing, like there were times of day where it failed more.
Interesting.
I thought like during average work hours kind of in the US, and it was much better on the weekends for me. But that seems to have evened out a little bit too. So maybe they're probably balancing this stuff out constantly. So I expect that'll change a lot over time.
Can you tell me what was your favorite moment with Siri AI so far? Because I think maybe we've been very critical in this episode. I've also was very critical in my story, but I also shared some. I think there are lots of good parts
No, I
about
agree.
Siri AI. And I kind of wanna, because we obviously, like, as I wrote in my article, uh, I'm very accustomed to agents and Codex, Claude. I'm actually checking out Kimi this week since I ran out of Codex usage.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that there were, like, every day now I'm using Siri AI for a bunch of things, and
Yeah.
and I realized that I'm already kind of taking it for granted. I cannot imagine going back to the old Siri, and so I wanna make an effort, I guess, to share the good moments a little bit more, because otherwise I think we risk of sounding just critical, just like OpenAI fanboys
Yeah.
who are saying that the new Siri is terrible, and I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And I don't think it should be compared to something like Codex either. I think
I
it
mean,
should.
the models can be compared. I mean, I'm sure somebody will do benchmarks
Yeah,
with the
well, you
Apple
can
Foundation
compare it. I
model.
think it's fair to compare it to something like ChatGPT, which is
It's
really,
fair because it's an open market, and these are large language models, and Apple is entering this space, and they should take all the criticism that's going their way. But also, I think that
yeah,
the product itself, I think, has many good parts already.
it does. And I think that the thing that I try, I mean, I don't want to sound too critical. On the other hand, I do want to kind of hold Apple to its promises, especially when it comes to things like app intents and whether you can actually do things in apps
Mm,
with this tool, which is pretty thin right now. But I
yeah.
have had a lot of nice moments. I mean, just little stuff like day-to-day stuff. I was going through a website and I was finding out how much we were paying for various services, and I was just like typing down a quick name and a dollar amount and had a bunch of messy notes. I dropped it into Siri AI in the app and I said, make this into a table and total it and give me the average of these numbers. And it did it really fast and perfectly
Nice.
accurate. And I was able to copy it and drop it into a note. It's exactly what I wanted. I didn't need a spreadsheet. I didn't need anything fancy. I had like 8 lines of text with some numbers. And I was like, just format it nicely and clean it up, add it, do the math, and give it to me. And it was great just the other day.
Yeah. This one I mentioned in my story. I had a really good moment when I was on vacation and I took a picture of this, like, giant ship
Right.
that was docked in front of us, and I actually really like the the Siri camera integration, like the new camera control. Basically, when you hold
Yeah,
down
it works really well.
the new visual intelligence. I think it's a little strange, maybe initially, because when you freeze the frame, uh, you don't have to formulate a question. It just tells you something based on what you're capturing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and then you can ask follow-up questions. But the idea is that you just hold down and you snap a photo of something, and Siri AI
Yeah.
just tells you something about it, and then you can ask your additional questions. So I had a really good time when I took a picture of this ship, and it told me, "Hey, you're looking at this particular vessel used by the Italian Navy as a training ship,"
Yeah.
and that was really accurate. And then, of course, to balance it out, when I ask follow-up questions, like, "Where is it currently docked?" And it said, "Well, I cannot tell you about right now, but last year it was in Sardinia." I was like, "Well, I don't care about last year."
It's Gaeta right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I had another one. I mean, we talked a little bit about search. And while, yes, I can very easily go into messages and find old messages from people, and that works perfectly fine without getting Siri AI involved. It is handy sometimes to get a little more context. And I've done this a couple of times with things that you've mentioned to me. I'd be like, what was that date, that event that Federico sent me a date about a couple of weeks ago? And it'll describe it to me and then give me the link. And that I kind of like, because if I don't need to like dig back into the old messages, if I know that, oh yeah, that's right, that's what he told me, it was in September on this date, I can find it really easily, and I've got the information I need. That's all I wanted to find. I don't need to go digging through my iMessages.
Yeah, I honestly think that if they get their search to work for historical data, like even going back multiple years,
Yes.
and if they get their app integrations to work with the third-party stuff, assuming that obviously third-party developers do the work of supporting the app intents and the new schemas and the donations, the entities, all those things. I really think they have I think they have a good 1.0 product. I think they do.
They do. The other thing that impressed me too, that it was an example in my story, is that it's very timely when it comes to current events and sports. It was easy to say, ask, is Wimbledon over yet? And Wimbledon was not over at the time, and it was right about that. I asked it one morning about the death of a singer, a celebrity that I read about on another website. And when I first asked, when I first saw it, it said, no, as of June, the person was alive. And that was good context because it told me a month ago, because I was asking in July. And then about an hour or two later, I asked again, and it had been updated and had the accurate information and actually linked to the story I had seen in Apple News. Not to Apple News, it didn't link. It linked directly to the website, but it was the same story. And so that kind of current event type news is being updated pretty quickly. You have more trouble when you do something like, give me the last story published by MacStories. And it doesn't have to be MacStories. It can be a big site. It can be the New York Times. It can be, The Verge. It can be any website. That is somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks stale, I've found.
Yeah. The final thing I wanted to mention, what do you think of the new voices?
I like them a lot. I think they're really good.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean,
I tuned them so that I brought the slider in settings all the way up to expressivity, like whatever it's called, like make it more expressive, and make it faster.
I was gonna say I knew you would do the faster. I didn't know you'd do the more expressive.
Yeah, I like my fake voices to talk fast. Also, the real voices, I listen to all podcasts at like 1.6 or 1.8, depending on the person.
That's really fast. I actually edit now in 1.4, which
is
about as fast as I can go and still hear mistakes well. But yeah, no, I think the voices are really well done, and I think they're competitive with some of the best voices I've heard out there and that other AI companies have built.
Well, what are we going to talk about in AppStories Plus, John?
I don't know.
More thoughts on the betas?
Yeah, we should do that. I think maybe the betas would be another thing we can talk about.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode, everybody. You can find us over at macstories.net, and I want to thank our two sponsors for this episode, Daylite and Decagon. You can find me and Federico on social media as well. Just look for Federico. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.